I've been thinking about this since 9/11 a couple weeks ago, watching some of the old footage and how the journalism in this country has really become a serious problem. 2001 gave them the ultimate drug dose, that super hit of journalistic dopamine. Ratings for weeks. It's a fucking rush, man. It's a rush of money and a rush of attention and prestige and power and access. They wanted more. They were all on board for Bush going to war in Iraq, because they knew they'd have people glued to their TVs watching all that live footage of tanks driving across the desert heading towards Baghdad and shit. They turned on Bush with Katrina, getting to go down there and preen in front of a bunch of starving people and coming in with cameras and crews, and they got their helicopters and shit. Unfortunately, at first they didn't start to bring water until people started bitching at them about it, and then they reluctantly are like, oh yeah, we can bring a case of bottled Avion with us or some shit. But it was just a big rating scare, and that's where they turned on George Bush. They were all for him up until that point. They think they created Barack Obama, and they've convinced themselves that they were responsible for him being elected, and ignoring the fact that he was just a solid candidate. When you have realistic expectations of what politicians are, and you don't buy into the mythical hype that people put up about them, he was a solid candidate and better than what John McCain had become. In 2000, in the primaries, I was rather pro-McCain over Bush. But Bush knocked him down with dirty tactics. And McCain kind of debased himself to get himself repositioned, kissing a lot of the asses that he had once been admirable for refusing to kiss, especially in the evangelical community and whatnot. In order for him to be able to run in 2008, and especially with the Sarah Palin thing in the mix, it wasn't even anything against Sarah Palin, because as we've seen, John McCain would have lived long enough to have served a full 2-term presidency. That wasn't a risk. But it just showed poor decision-making on his point. Like, just too willing to listen to bad advice from his advisors on that one. There were better female candidates. God damn, he could have gone with Kay Bailey Hutchinson. She would have been a great vice president. And totally would have been fine with her being president if McCain had kicked the bucket earlier. No, Obama won because he was the better candidate. But the news media convinced themselves that they did it, and they did it by creating a unity of women and minorities. And that's part of why the news media has so, sided with the left and have stayed that way instead of flipping back to being pro-Republican now that we have a new administration. That's also, I guess, in part because the Obama campaign knew that the media was on their side, and so there's a lot of give and take and high-level access for various personalities and all that kind of stuff going on. And so then we have the 2016 election. The media thinks that, they're in control of the world. The fourth estate is actually the shadow government. It's not necessarily, people in a bunker under NORAD or any of that kind of shit. The puppet masters is the propaganda department. Our free range, money grubbing, only interested in selling advertising propaganda department. They're our masters, or at least they think they are. They thought they really enjoyed during the Obama administration. You could tell that they really liked the self-congratulatory, getting to do and here's Rachel Maddow's documentary on the first black president taking the first black pee in the first White House bathroom and all that kind of, they're very proud of themselves. And I'm speaking as someone who voted for Obama. I'm not knocking the guy. I'm knocking their presentation of the guy and their help in creating a mythology around him that both sides bought into. He performed exactly as I expected him to. I was perfectly satisfied with Obama. And they wanted to recreate that. They wanted another, man, oh shit, we can get all these nice firsts. If we can get Hillary Clinton elected, we could have Rachel Maddow's special Friday night 1-hour documentary about the first woman taking the first sit-down pee in the White House. And they bought into the idea that if they got the worst Republican candidate elected in their primary to run against Hillary, that would help cinch things. Hillary has so much experience, just a mountain of goddamn experience. Experience doing what, though? I don't think anyone bothered to ask. And if she's going up against a goddamn television reality star who hates Mexicans, there's no way. There's no way she could possibly lose. We got this in the bag, guys. Everybody, we got this in the bag. Don't worry. He's actually been working with us for years because he's an attention whore. We have tons of footage. We already have something we're going to whip out the last week of him talking some shit about grabbing pussy. There's no way Hillary's going to lose this one. High fives, everyone. And we saw how that went. Now the media is furious at Trump for having defied them when he didn't. He did exactly what they wanted him to do. They promoted his ass. Trump is their creation. Trump is not the fault of white nationalists or people in Ohio or whatever it is else that you're trying to blame him on. It's not the fault of the Electoral College. There's still good reasons to keep that thing around. Trump is the media's creation. He's a media creature. It's been amusing watching him because he's had the most interesting interplay with the media than any other president I can think of, except maybe Johnson. I'm willing to say that Donald Trump could be an honorary Texan. And that's saying a lot, especially for some fucking New Yorker. Who knows where the hell he was born. George Bush wasn't no fucking Texan. Just adopted the state conveniently like a lot of politicians do. If you want to beat Trump, you need a good candidate. And I don't see anything emerging on the left at the moment. In fact, a couple of the ones that I thought might be able to take him on have been knocked down by the self-immolation of the Democratic Party. I guess I'd give the best odds on Tulsi Gabbard. She's the only Democrat I could picture myself voting for at the moment. And I didn't really have that opinion until I saw her on Joe Rogan and had enough time to actually listen to her and get a feel for what she's actually like. And that's ironic because they want to run a female candidate. So let's see them run Tulsi Gabbard. I'd rather see her than Elizabeth Warren. The Democrats are just so... Ugh. They're well-intentioned, but by projecting so much, what they actually are doing is creating the things that exist in the shadows of what they're projecting. We got to stop white nationalism. We got to make sure that the Nazis are dead and that's never going to come back again. So even though we're all past that now, let's keep teaching children that they got to overcome white privilege. Thereby also teaching all these kids of all colors that white privilege is a thing and that the white people have it and the non-whites don't. That's not at all something that's going to cause problems and resurrect and keep alive the very thing that we were trying to make sure doesn't come back. That was already dead. Getting rid of Alex Jones isn't going to erase people's conspiracy thinking. And I noticed that Ancient Aliens is still on the air. That's weird. America's been selling conspiracies in media since before Alex Jones was a thing. When Alex Jones first kind of emerged, I just dismissed him and as largely as okay, so the guy who's watched a lot of X-Files and it has a radio program, and there's a bunch of dumbasses in rural Texas who believe this shit. And it's just kind of spiraled on from there. But getting rid of him isn't going to change any of them. Silencing people doesn't actually change their thinking, and you can't rearrange people's thoughts. You can terrify people and with social ramifications or threat of losing their livelihood into staying shut up, but they won't buy your products if they don't have to, as we can see with a lot of the failures of these politically overtoned movies that we keep getting lately. And the entertainment industry is as much a part of the media that is responsible for Trump as the news companies. As I think explains it also a lot about Hollywood. Slightly different, maybe. Trump is less so their direct creation, although they've never minded being chummy with the guy in the past because he's got money and notoriety and fame. But he was such a D-lister. He wasn't he's no George Clooney, you know. Just a quirky little cameo from a Macaulay Culkin movie. That's all he was worthy of. It's so white trash of this country to have elected the guy. But who positioned him to get elected? The media. The media, who basically lied to everyone about what was going to happen that fateful Tuesday. But now we're supposed to believe them. We're supposed to believe who they call the bad guys are. That we're supposed to believe what they think the future is going to be like. Whether or not my natural inclinations are still towards socially liberal ideals doesn't matter if the entities that purport to represent that are continuously trying to deceive me, or get caught in it and then go right back into it without ever really doing anything to repent. That's why I switched to YouTube. It's not that I necessarily believe the things or agree with the opinions I hear, but by watching YouTube, you get a more accurate idea of what regular, everyday schnooks are thinking and feeling about what's going on. That's why I was not surprised by Trump being elected. In the last few weeks there before the election, warned several coworkers and friends from other circles that, look, guys, you do not have this shit in the bag, and here's why. Republicans have an automatic ground game. Democrats only show up when they're excited for the candidate. And your party manipulated things in such a way that the candidate that people had any at all level of excitement for didn't win your primary. And instead we got this default candidate that at first was just, before Bernie came on the scene, Hillary was put up against the two of the most schlubby, no-name Democrat dudes you could possibly think of. They were totally setting it up that she's our candidate, we're running her, we're not taking no for an answer. Bernie was an annoyance. But Bernie got the excitement, and they ignored that. What got the Democrats into political office of the presidency in 2008 and kept them there in 2012 because people liked Barack Obama. It didn't matter anything at all to do with his policies or his promises. And now you're asking people to unelect somebody because they don't like them, but you don't have anyone better to present. And you want people to go stand in line for hours at voting polls in cities, because that's where the Democrats vote. If they can even find their polling station, because cities are so cluttered, and if you even have time, city life ain't like rural life. You got a shitty job at a fast food joint, even though legally they're supposed to let you go. They might not be able to let you go to go vote. Not every state has early voting, or not everyone thinks to register for that kind of shit, especially young kids. And since they can stay on their parents' insurance into their mid-20s, I guess that's now the age limit for kids. I guess the age of consent should be raised to 24 too, and the age of drinking to 30. Maybe we're not adults until 33. Maybe just like giant hobbits, giant infantilized people who eat 5 meals a day. Yes, that's where we should be going. But no, anyway, they want to unelect Trump on hate. And I guess if there's anyone they've stirred up enough hate about that could pull it off, it could be him. But that's never worked in the past, ever. As much as people didn't like George Bush, they weren't able to get him out of office in 2004, even with Kerry. Although, in a way, there's another example of them undermining the candidate that actually had the enthusiasm behind him for the more standardized party line, dots all his I's and crosses his T's properly candidate and Kerry. And it lost them again to a guy who, even if it was a doofus personality, at least he had personality. You need to find a candidate you can all get behind fast. And I don't think it's going to happen this time because of the self-immolation process. You're too busy chewing each other apart to have your act together. To beat Donald Trump of all people. It's not that Donald Trump is great. It just really, how pathetic do you have to be